All right. Hey, it's Wednesday. I'm April Sabral. I'm back with The Positive Effect, our weekly live broadcast where we bring amazing leaders on and have career conversations and really celebrate the positive effect of leadership, specifically in the industry that I love and have worked in for over 30 years, which is retail. And I'm the founder and president of Retail U, an online e-learning education platform for retail leadership development, as well as an author of the book called The Positive Effect. And today I'm super excited because I've got Tim Dumas on the line, and we're going to, delve into your career, Tim. So welcome to The Positive Effect.
Thanks, April. It's so fun to be here.
Yeah, so before we get into your story, I'm just going to set us up really quickly. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Put your name in the chat where you're joining us from and make any comments as you go through, because any insights, anything you learn, these conversations are really to learn from leaders like Tim about what, their lessons learned. And so any insights you can share, we love to go back and read the comments afterwards. And if you're joining us and back, welcome back and thank you for showing up every week. And then the last thing I'm going to say is share this with your retail network in your feed, because the more people that get access to these kind of conversations, the more mentorship happens. And we are all about that at Retail U. So, Tim, it's all about your story today. I'm so happy to finally get you on alive.
Yeah, it's great. We've been trying to do this for a while, April, and you and I met, it was probably about 3 years ago now, and had a great connection in retail leadership and coaching. So I've really enjoyed, reading about your path and watching your path, and super excited to talk to you today about both of our paths.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Tim. I know we connected when I was in Vancouver, I think, on a David's Tea store tour. And just because we're John C. Maxwell coaches, right? We're part of the GMT DNA, which is amazing.
Absolutely.
So what's your story? If you can start off like sharing, your career journey into retail. Like, we promote retail as a really amazing career. It was for me because I started off as a part-time salesperson and made it to a vice president of 250 stores, which I never saw happening. And retail is always perceived as this like accidental career, I want to say, because a lot of us started off that way. But like, what's your journey into retail? How did you end up, and like share a bit more about your career? How did you get into it?
Sure. There's probably two cool stories about that. Number one, I fell into it probably accidentally, just like you had mentioned. But I work with a fourth generation family business. So my great grandfather, and it wasn't in retail at the time, but it morphed into retail. He ran a little country pub in Australia. My grandfather then brought the family in the 1970s to Canada, and he had 11 children. So a number of his children ended up in that same industry at that time, the pub industry. Fast forward a few years to where retail liquor stores became a thing in the 80s in British Columbia and Canada here, and our business morphed to that. So now I'm involved in a fourth generation family retail liquor store business that has 13 stores throughout British Columbia. So number one, that's how I got into it. And number two, the story about how I got into doing it the way I do it. And you and I talked about coaching and how we've developed at our company a real coaching culture all the way through the organization. And it really started with, I really felt that coaching was what I was called to do in my whole life. I played college football. And in my first year of college football, I'm at this little college in Erie, Pennsylvania, walking off the field with our coach named Joe Kimball, one of the greatest leaders I'd ever met. As we're walking off the field, his two little kids run up to him. They were about 6 and 8 years old at the time. He gives them a big hug, says hi to him, and then continues to walk off the field with me as we had a meeting coming up. And he said, Timmy, everybody called me Timmy in football. He said, Timmy, I love coaching. But he said, you know what's really difficult about it? I start work at 7 in the morning or even before my kids wake up, and I don't get home till 10 at night. And during the season, I rarely see my kids. And even in the off season, I'm on the road recruiting. So that's really difficult. And I made the decision that day. I always thought I would, take my football playing career as far as I could, and then I'd be a coach. I made that decision that day that I wouldn't become a football coach.
Oh, wow.
And for 20 years, I thought that dream of coaching or my calling to coaching was dead. until one conversation I had with our executive coach at Jack's 6 years ago. We hired an executive coach, and it changed our organization, allowed us to grow by leaps and bounds. A couple of years later, I said to him, I said, this coaching thing is amazing. You're doing amazing things with our executive team. We need to do this with the rest of the organization. And he looks at me and I look back and he said, Tim, you're crazy. I go, I know, but what's the answer? And he said, you're already doing it. You just got to get better at it. You got to be a better coach. So I said, okay, that's great. What do I need to do? And he said, you need to investigate how you're going to become that. I said, great. I'll talk to you next month and we'll figure that out. He said, no, you're not. It was 4:30 in the afternoon that day. He goes, call me back before 5 p.m. tomorrow. You have 24 hours. I want you to tell me how you're going to become a better coach. Basically, within 24 hours, I had already been involved in John Maxwell, read some of his books. I made the decision to become a John Maxwell certified coach. 2 months later, I'm on a plane to Florida to spend a week with John Maxwell, and the rest is history.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. I did not know that about you. I didn't know that you played football at all. So that's so cool. And that it's a fourth generation business. And you're the chief operating officer there, right? That's what you do.
Yes.
Yeah. And coach and master coach, it sounds like. And, I'm really happy that you just shared that story about your decision to become a John C. Maxwell coach, because it feels like I had the same moment in my career when I was growing, and I was like, I am coaching, but I need to invest and become better at it for my team. And I think that there's a lot of leaders out there that just kind of go along in retail and are coaching. They are coaching because it's a real high touch coaching business, retail, right? Because you're working with different people every day. But do they ever take the step or feel like they need to take the step to go into more professional coaching or that investment? That's a real decision that you made.
Yeah, it changed my life, and it really helped change our organization because other people are now beginning to do the same thing. It's trickling down all the way to every member of our organization, the members of the front line, the store management team, our executive team.
Yeah, if I hadn't become a John Maxwell coach, I don't know if Retail U would have ever been built, quite honestly, because that was my first journey to starting leadership development with my own team, which then turned into Retail U. So we're going to dive into a little bit more around, leadership, because you and me share the same passion, and you just shared what you did and, the John Maxwell team and what changed your life becoming a coach. So if you think about leadership, how do you develop mission critical skills in leaders? You're working with a team and you said it changed your organization having this coach come in and then what you took on the next step. So how do you do that? Because people talk about culture, Tim, and leadership being a really important piece of that culture. But then it's the how, right? It's the how do you actually do that as a leader when you're busy all day? So how do you do that in your business?
Well, number one, it's the intentionality, right? And number two, it always starts with you. John Maxwell asks, he said, who's the most difficult person to lead? And it's ourselves, right? So unless we start modeling it ourselves, people aren't going to buy in with that with that trust, right?
Yeah.
So when we start modeling that and asking the questions and supporting our teams, that's when they start to do it themselves, because they see the value in that, just like I did with our coach. And I said, I want to do this. I want to do this better for other people. Yeah. Now people are saying that to me. So it really starts with asking great questions and then supporting people and holding them accountable to achieve those resolutions that they had in those questions. So there's a couple of great coaching questions that I ask, and my goal is to ask, each person I get to meet every day, how can I support you to achieve your most audacious personal and professional dreams? And when I first ask people that, they look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, personal and professional dreams? Why do you care about me personally?
Right.
But if you come into an organization, you come to work with us at Jack's, I've never met a person that showed up on the first day, said, hey, great, I'm super happy to be here. How can I increase EBITDA for the company? Can I increase dividends for the company? That is my goal. That's not my goal, and I'm a partner in the company, right? My goal is, people have goals of how do I support my family? How can I take my family on that next trip? How can I buy that house that I've dreamed of? All these things. That's really, we work to impact others, hopefully, but impacting others is also a lot in our personal lives, not just our professional lives. And so few people in the workplace ask how we can support each other in our personal lives, yet that's usually why we go to work. So why are we not bringing that together? And that's really what we've done, is bringing the personal and professional together to achieve our goals and dreams as a company.
I love that. I mean, I'm going to go back and watch this and write that question down, because I think what you're sharing, especially now with the year that we've been through, if you weren't doing it before, you'd better be doing it now. And I think what you just shared is so important. You just made me have light bulbs. People go to work to achieve their personal dreams, right? Whether that's owning a home, whether that's putting their kid through college, whatever it is. So if you can show up and actually support people do that, of course, they're going to do more for you. I love that book, The Leader That Has No Title by Robin Sharma, who says that 10% discretionary effort comes from how people feel working for their leader. And you cannot pay for that, right? Like that's an intrinsic kind of feeling that is instilled. And it comes from when people care. Like John talks about that all the time.
Yeah, and here's one great story about how we put that into action. So there's someone that works with us, and I'll call her Rachel. So I was having what we call dream session. I'm having a dream session with Rachel, and she comes to dream session. I ask her, that question, but I followed up by saying, if you knew you couldn't fail, what's the biggest, boldest, most audacious dream that you would want to achieve? And one of the issues that we have is we all have limiting beliefs that we don't achieve the things that we would hope to achieve because we're like, well, I can't do that. I grew up here, or I don't have this education, or I'm not like this. Forget about that. What is your dream to achieve? And this one dream, I said, tell me about a dream. And this person said, well, you know what? I have this car, and I've always had beater used cars, and they break down. And sometimes I end up being late for work or appointments because my car's not reliable. And I said, have you ever thought about buying a new car that's reliable? And Rachel said back to me, well, no, I couldn't. I don't have enough money, or I don't have this, or I don't have that. And I said, okay, just prove to me that what you're telling me is true. She looks at me, she said, what do you mean? I said, prove to me that you can't buy a new car. You don't have this, you don't have that, you don't have the money. Prove that to me. She said, how do I do that? I said, here's the number of the local Mazda dealership. Call somebody there, and then call the finance person. Say, can I buy a new car? I already knew she could. She just didn't know. So she calls them up. They're like, yeah, you qualify. Here's what you qualify for. This thing, this Mazda 3. 2 weeks later, I walk into the office. She's beaming. Rachel's beaming. She's like, Tim, you got to come with me to the parking lot. I'm like, look, I got a meeting. Hey, she's like, Tim, pulls me like running to the parking lot, clicking her keys furiously. We run up to this beautiful blue Mazda 3. She's like, Tim, look at this. I did it. I have a brand new car, and it wouldn't have happened if you didn't ask me that question about my dreams.
Wow, that's amazing. And I bet like her loyalty, her passion towards the company, the way that she helps customers every day now is, I mean, she was probably good already, but like now it's probably on fire because of what you actually did for her personally. I think this is so important for leaders to hear. Why do you think leaders don't do that? Like, why do you think leaders don't think about and igniting and inspiring people's personal dreams in a business?
Fear. We're afraid to ask people personal questions, right?
Right.
And some people said, when I first started doing this, and I first started asking people, what are your personal dreams? What are your dreams for your family? What are your professional dreams? What are your dreams for adventure? How are you going to be creative? When I started asking people this, one person said to me, Tim, no one's going to want to talk to you about their personal dreams. And I said, well, look, they don't have to. And if there's a dream that they don't want to share, then guess what? Don't share it. Right. But here's what I know. If we share our dreams with more people, there is going to be someone that can help you achieve that dream. It was very simple. I knew someone at the Mazda dealership, got her to call somebody, And if she wouldn't have shared that, she wouldn't have achieved it. So when people see others achieving personal dreams, they start wanting to get involved. And it might not happen as quickly as it did for Rachel in that situation, but it's going to happen. These things have happened over and over again just by asking those questions. In all my time of asking people if I can support them in their personal dreams, I've had one person out of hundreds, if not thousands, say, I'm not really interested.
Interesting. That's super interesting. And I think you just hit a key point. It's like we're scared in business to ask personal questions because we're trained in a way like what you can say, what you can't say, what's appropriate, what's not, right? Like we are, like as leaders, we're very conscientious and conscious of like respecting people's boundaries and things like that. But I think in today's age of leadership, the fact that if you care about somebody whole, like we talk about bringing your whole self to work, right? Like we talk about like encouraging people to bring the whole self. So to do that, you have to be a leader that allows that to happen and fosters that to happen, which is exactly what you're doing at Jax, which is amazing. I want to come and work for you.
We would love that, April. We'll talk right after this. But you know what ends up happening is so someone like Rachel, she wants to share that with others. But do you know what else ends up happening? She ends up in our meetings, and this just happened in the last year. We've always had what we call dream sessions quarterly with our team. So whoever you officially report to in the org structure, that's who you have your dream session with. I had someone walk into a dream session that I was doing with her, and she said to me, Tim, what are your dreams and how can I support you? And I said, hey, I'm doing the dream session here. I'm supposed to ask you that question. And they said, no. They said, this is what we're going to do together. So we've actually changed our dream sessions that they're not a one-way, me supporting them. It's a two-way street now. So no matter who you are in the organization, if you are technically lowest on the in the org chart or the highest on the org chart, you're asking the others the questions about how can I support you to achieve your personal and professional dreams.
God, what would happen if every business leader, not just in retail, I mean, I love retail because it's my industry, but would show up and ask everybody like next week, ask them that specific question and started having dream sessions with people. Wow, like that's incredible from a culture standpoint. And I talk about that in my second step, create, because create is all about creating what you want in your life. And helping people do that and envision it, which is exactly what you're doing. Because until you ask somebody, they don't really think about it.
They don't think about it, and sometimes they don't think about what they need to do to achieve that, right? So we then and once we have the dream session, we'll do a strategy session about how can we achieve that dream, right? It might be something that's that they have to grow in the organization for. They might say, hey, look, it's my goal to live in this area of town. It's a bit more expensive. So we'll say, okay, what kind of income would you need for that? And what kind of position do you need to work towards to achieve that income? Okay, you need to achieve a manager level, director, whatever that is. And then we work towards that. But the other cool thing that happens is that we start finding about their dreams. And you know what? Not everybody's dream is to be with our company forever. Right. And there's this taboo thing in business that we don't talk. It's the elephant in the room. We don't want to talk about that. Their dream might not be to work with us forever. And you know what? That's okay. But when I say to you, you know what? Your dream is to work in a different kind of organization, or in our business, we sell wine, beer, and spirits. They want to go work for a winery, be a winemaker. Then I start working with that person to help them make those connections so that in 2 or 3 years, they can go work to learn to be a winemaker. And people say, you're pushing people out of the company. And I said, well, I'm actually supporting people. We're going to have a great person for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and we're going to help them grow. Is that not better than the alternative, number one? And number two, I actually know that they want to grow. So we're going to start to work on the next person up to fulfill their role. So when that person actually gets that next role, we're all ready to go.
So you're prepared, which is great because you're having transparent conversations. Brilliant. I love this, man. If I was watching this, I'd be sitting there with a pad and paper right now, like writing a ton of notes, like seriously. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I want to pull a little bit on your experiences. So, can you share like any major, decisions that you had to make in your career that were really helpful for others to learn from, or any hurdles that you had to overcome as a leader?
So one really cool decision I had was there was a time in my career I had an opportunity to work at a different company in a different role. And I thought about this really for a while, and I was so lucky to have a coach at that time. And so I worked through it with my coach. And the allure of this role with this company was it was going to be financially more lucrative for me.
Okay.
But I went to my coach, and he said, Tim, what about this company you're passionate about? What about this company fits your values? And what about this company fits your personal purpose and mission? And it didn't at all. There was nothing wrong with the company. It just wasn't the right fit for me. And I only thought about it based upon, well, it's a great lucrative opportunity. I should take it. But when I really dug down to my, what my values are and what my purpose was, I realized it was better for me to actually fulfill that. And that, financially that would work out in the end. So that was one area that really having a coach helped strengthen my resolve to live out my purpose.
So you really believe in having a coach yourself personally, as well as coaching others. That's what I'm hearing from you.
if I'm coaching others and I don't have a coach, I'm an imposter, right?
Yeah.
People talk to me, often. They're like, well, do I really need a coach? And I said, well, have you ever heard of a baseball team that wins the World Series and then says, well, we're doing pretty well. We'll get rid of our coach.
Right.
No, it doesn't work. Right. So everybody needs a coach, especially business leaders and executives, because that just helps focus you in some of those decisions. Because sometimes in our mind, we can kind of play tricks on ourselves like I did. I actually wasn't thinking about what my end game was. Stephen Covey says, start with the end in mind.
Right.
And at the end of my life, did I want to be known as being this executive in this company? That wasn't what I wanted to be known by. I wanted to be known by my purpose and values. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. My best friend always asks this question to people that work on her team. What do you want to be known for? And because we have a title, we work for an organization. We could work for any brand, any retail chain. We have a title, but really it's like, what do you want to be known for? And I used to say to leaders, like when you show up to meetings, especially cross-functional meetings, I would say things like, it's great to introduce your name and your title, but why don't you tell people what you actually want to be known for? Like, what do you do? So it could be, like I inspire and encourage leaders to exceed our customers' expectations versus saying like I'm a regional director, and they'd look at me like, that sounds kind of strange and goofy. And I'm like, no, but people are going to then ask you, well, how do you do that? That sounds interesting, and then you're actually putting it out there of what you actually want to achieve, which then people are going to help you. So it's really interesting.
It is. That's the whole purpose is to live that personal purpose. Yeah. And that's why the coaching process is so valuable.
So you shared like quite some good insights already, but like, is there one piece of advice that somebody gave you in your career that you just like, it stuck in your head and you held on to it and it really helped you succeed?
Wow. I mean, certainly I wouldn't have, developed these dream sessions and this coaching culture if I didn't have people that helped bring that out of me. Obviously, talking about people's dreams, I got that idea from Matthew Kelly in his book, The Dream Manager, one of the greatest leadership books that I've read. But I don't think I really knew how to implement it until when I joined Jax. One of the questions I was asked when I was moving full time into the company was, what are your dreams and how can we support them? And it was like a light bulb. I'm like, I want to be in a place where people are going to support me. Right. And there weren't a lot of promises made at Jax other than I'll do everything I can to support you, Tim, to achieve your dreams. And so that was really where a light bulb went off for me. And I said, how can I do that with others? And that's really catapulted to where we are today, and why that's so important, not only in the retail industry, but any industry.
Yeah, support is this. I really love that word support that you're bringing that up. I talk about that a lot in the first pillar of accept. People, when I would go in to do store visits, I'd always say, what's making you successful? And it would always come back to, I feel supported. And I unpack support because I'm like, what does support mean? It means different things to different people. But you have to ask people what support means. You can't just make an assumption that what it means to you means to somebody else, right? But generally it comes back to, I feel like I can be my whole self. I feel like I have a voice. I feel like I'm heard. I feel like I'm seen, right? And that is, a difficult thing for people, because we're always in that book Skill with People, which I love, by Les Giblin. He says about people are more interested in themselves than anybody else. This is human nature, by the way. So it's just who we are. So if that is our human nature, we have to work extra hard to be more interested in other people, which then helps them feel supported. And that is intentionality in leadership, I truly believe. And I think, we need to get better at that as leaders, just holistically. So have you got any questions that you want for me? We're about 25 minutes. We've got about 5 minutes left before we start wrapping up the show. This is an amazing conversation, by the way. I love talking to you.
No, love it too. So, we talked a lot about how my kind of career has morphed in, from in retail leadership. I also have a coaching company now, and I put coaching into retail leadership. Yeah. You and I are both John Maxwell coaches. How have you taken coaching into your leadership at Retail U, but also before at David's Tea? And what was your aha moment on why this is so important?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I took it into my journey at David's Tea when I started to realize that if I wanted to reach a vice president level, and then, John always says, if you're a leader from 1 to 10, right? 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. If you're a 5, you're going to attract 3s on your team. And so I wanted to build a really high performing team. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to be an 8, then I got to really become a really good coach. I was already a pretty good coach, but I wanted to become another coach. And then I took another coaching certificate actually last year under the World Association of Business Coaches, just to elevate, because I think leaders are learners. And I took it into my regional directors team, and I started facilitating offsites specifically with them, kind of like what you're doing at Jack's, and would take them and do offsites, and then build a coaching model in the Retail U kind of assortment library of courses that teach positive intent with coaching. Because I think, asking questions is a skill, right? So we've now launched a coaching certification program on the Retail U platform specifically to build retail certified coaches, because I have done those 2 coaching programs and they elevated me, but I feel like sometimes retail is like short coaching in the moment on the sales floor versus like doing an hour coaching session with somebody, right? So I think we've kind of been able to do that. So the John Maxwell team was the one that got me started on that program, because it made me have the language to train others, the things I was already doing in my head, but didn't know how to relate it, right? If that makes sense. Because that's what happens when you take programs and you study books. For me anyway, personally, it elevates my language and it gives me those tools to teach others.
Love it. Love it. As you were speaking about how coaching in retail, I couldn't help but think of Ken Blanchard's book, The 1 Minute Manager. Yeah. His 1 minute praisings, reprimands, and goal settings, right? Where that's really what we're trying to do in retail, because sometimes we only have short snippets, but that's really, retail coaching. Yeah.
Retail coaching to me is like a blend of coaching performance, developing others, and mentorship all in one go. And giving feedback, whereas traditional coaching is like pulling it out of people. You do that in retail coaching, but there is a little bit of element of, I want to give you feedback on what I've observed, because you're in the moment seeing it, right? Versus coaching a one-on-one client where you're just helping them brainstorm and get out of them what the answers are already inside. So it's a little bit different. And that's why we launched the coaching program on Retail U. Okay, I always say every week, this conversation, I could have it for an hour with all of you, because it's so interesting and inspiring, but we're coming up to 30 minutes. So what advice do you have for anybody today in the current retail, industry and climate to be a successful leader in retail?
Love. My good friend Steve Farber wrote a book called Love is Just Damn Good Business. And, we talked about how people don't ask questions, personal questions to people about how they can support and in their dreams. The other thing we don't say in the business world is we don't actually live out love. And what if in the business world and the retail world, we actually lived out the word love? The horrible thing about the English language is we only have one word for love. And when we think about that, If I'm to say I love you, people say, oh, that's weird. Maybe I should call HR. Tim's being, but love in the Greek language, or in C.S. Lewis's book, The Four Loves, there's different kinds of love. There's love to a brother and a sister. There's, there's agape love, which is unconditional love that has nothing to do with romantic love. If we have an organization that we can bring love into the workplace and support each other's dreams, that's where we'll have a great place. Would you not want to work for a place that you said, you know what? My company loves me.
Oh, I love that. And I just pulled something up on my phone that I saw on Instagram the other day, and it had love, and then it said LOVE, let others voluntarily evolve. Okay. So if you actually think about that, let others voluntarily evolve, that's what you're helping people do every day, becoming the best part of themselves. So anyway, you just made me think about that. I love that. I'm gonna go get that book. And I read that book that Monty Moran wrote called Love is Free, Guac is Extra. And he talks a lot about that. And he was the CEO of Chipotle. So he created that culture. So great words of advice. Is there anything else before we wrap up that you want to share that you didn't get to share? I always like to ask this just because we have such an amazing conversation, but maybe there's something that you didn't get to share today.
Yeah, probably the one thing is I've been looking for the definition of leadership for years, and the best definition of leadership I've ever heard now is the word magnanimity. And I read a book called The Power of Magnanimity by a gentleman named Alex Havard, and he defined magnanimity, which I think defines leadership, as the spirit of striving for greatness by bringing out the greatness in others. And that's the best definition I've heard of leadership, because it really talks about our striving for greatness, but also if we don't bring it out in others, we're really not being great. So I'll leave you with that. And I'd love to connect with anyone in your organization if they're looking for, one-on-one coaching or group coaching, or they just want to have a chat about leadership in retail or leadership in general. I would be honored to have that conversation.
Oh, thank you, Tim. This was an amazing, amazing conversation with so many golden nuggets. I'm going to be like writing all the names of the books down so that I can go add them to my library, because there's a few in there that I haven't read. So thank you so much for taking a time out of your busy day from Jax, and for all of your words of wisdom today and sharing them with our audience. So we're going to start wrapping up this week's live. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did and you find this in your feed, I'm going to say it again, share this with other retail leaders and your network so that they can learn from Tim's amazing career journey and words of wisdom, because there was some golden nuggets dropped today. So I can't thank you enough, Tim. And this is, saying goodbye until next week for another episode of The Positive Effect.
Such a pleasure, April. Thank you.